my name is Marion. I'm from the blog Miss Mustard Seed.
And I'm Christy. I'm from the blog Rosemary in Time.
And we're on the part with these chairs where we're going to start to sand and distress them. So they've been painted. We painted them with Miss Mustard Seed's milk paint in one of our new European colors, Mora, which is sort of a gray-green, really, it's very a neutral color. It's one of our favorites, I would say now. Yeah.
Yes.
We both kind of love it.
If we could paint everything in this color, we would.
Right, so we're like, what should we paint these chairs? Well, Mora. Why not? Yeah. So we painted them. This one was painted, and we have not done anything to it yet. And this one has been distressed. So you can start to see how distressing really gives the piece character. Now, these pieces chipped a lot more than I expected them to, which was surprising because we used the bonding agent. But that does just happen with some pieces. That can happen with just about any kind of paint, that there's something on the surface that's a little bit oily that just resists. And so with some paints you might get some orange peeling, or you might get some sort of where the paint starts to pool away. And in milk paint's case, it just starts to chip off. It's just like, nope, not going to do it. And that's what happened here. And I did sand. I went back and I sanded in some areas, and I repainted some milk paint on. And where I did that, the paint has stuck. But I didn't do that all over the chair. So instead of just, now we could go back and sand everything and repaint it with the bonding agent. But instead of doing that, I decided to just go ahead and sand it, see how it looked. And we both were like, okay, it's not quite how we pictured it, but we really like the look. So we're going to go with that, like, ultra distressed. And we're upholstering it in a very creamy white nubby hemp fabric. So it's going to end up working really well. I think if we were doing like a real busy fabric.
Well, I think the textures will work in well together, and just the simplicity of the fabric will be.
Right. So we're going to distress this chair, and I'll bring you in a little closer so you can actually see what I'm doing, see what the technique is that I use. But when it comes to distressing, I think some people don't know what that is. Like, you're just like sanding a piece. Right. But there's a purpose to it. It's not just because we like everything to look like it's been heavily used or pulled out of a barn. Although we do like that.
We do like that.
The reason why we distress is to simulate age, the wear and tear that happens to a piece naturally over time. And paint starts to chip for a variety of reasons. For moisture, maybe it's just really, really old. If it's been exposed to heat, sometimes extreme colds, just extreme temperatures can make paint start to chip. And so that's what we're simulating, is that these chair frames have been around for much longer than they actually have been. And by removing some of the paint from the high points of the piece, it's going to simulate that. It's also going to bring out a lot of the detail, like this flower detail, and make the frame sort of come to life a little bit more. And to do this, we're going to use, this is just a piece of sandpaper from an orbital, there it goes, it's active. It's just from an orbital sander. I'm not going to use an orbital sander on this though. I'm going to hand sand it so I have more control. And I like to fold my sandpaper in half. And this is a medium grit, it's 120. I wouldn't recommend going too heavy, like if you go, so the lower the number, the heavier the grit. And if you go to a really low number, it can just look scratchy.
Right.
And if it's too fine, you're going to be sanding it and like nothing's going to come off and it's like, ah. But as we're sanding this, I can see that the paint is really loose. So you're going to see it come off in chunks. So it's not going to do that in every project. It's just that's what has happened with these chairs. Okay, so I'm going to just come in with the sandpaper and I'm being pretty aggressive with it since we're going to be, we're going for like a heavily distressed look. And you can see how the paint is just kind of flaking off. And I'm not rubbing really in any particular way, but one thing that I do often do is like this, like a flicking motion, and that kind of gives a little bit of a different look. You can see it pulls the paint off more in chunks as opposed to when I do this, it just sort of wears the paint off wherever I am rubbing the sandpaper. And then where I sanded and used the bonding agent, I have to really go in a little bit harder there to be able to remove the paint. Because I do want it to look consistent throughout. I don't want to have it like heavily distressed here and then not here, because that might look a little odd. And a good idea when you're distressing is to just take a step back and look at the overall view of the piece and how it's looking and if it's achieving the look you want. And if you're not getting the look that you want, you can always paint over again and kind of start over. So there's really not much that can happen that you can't fix. So don't get too stressed about it. So I think this section looks good. I don't have any loose, any more loose paint. Or if there is any, I want to make sure I get it all off. And when I'm done sanding the whole piece, I'm going to run over it with a vacuum and just to get up all the dust and loose bits before we go on to waxing. While I was sanding this chair, I had Christy start putting the antiquing wax on this one, and she finished it pretty quickly, maybe 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So it took me about 10 minutes to sand, and then Christy got the antiquing wax done during that time. As you can see, there's quite a difference in the color of the paint between what is unfinished and then what's been finished with the wax. The antiquing wax, we're using Miss Mustard Seed's antiquing wax that's sold with our milk paint line. And this is a finish and a technique sort of all in one. So we're using it to tone down the color of the paint. And also, since we have so much chipping and all of this dark wood showing through, it just sort of softens that effect a little bit. It ties the paint in with the dark wood a little bit better. So we're applying it directly to the paint in this particular instance. And we applied it pretty heavily so that, again, to just sort of mute the overall effect. We're applying the paint with a brush. This is just sort of a medium-sized waxing brush. You can use a cloth, or just a bushy old paintbrush would be fine. The problem with a cloth is you can't quite get it into all the little nooks and crannies of this piece. A cloth would be fine for like a table or a flat dresser, but for a piece like this, you want to use a brush so you can get into the details of it. Okay, so to apply the antiquing wax, I'm going to get just sort of a moderate amount on my brush. I don't want to get too much on the brush because it'd be wasteful, first of all, but it makes it a little bit harder to work with. Now, the key to antiquing wax and making it look authentic is to really get it into all of the little nooks and crannies of the piece. If you miss places, like on the chair that Christy did, there were a couple of places under the arms that she really didn't work the brush in. Yeah, I'm like calling her out on it now. She didn't really work the brush in, and so you could see the paint sort of showing through, and you can see it changes the color of the paint quite a bit. And it makes it look like the piece was waxed as opposed to like it happened naturally. So if you want to go for a really authentic look, you have to make sure you get it into all of the little nooks and crannies. And I'm working it in by sort of pouncing the brush. So you can that's why you want to use like a bushy brush or a thick brush, because you don't want to do this with your like brand new brush that has a nice edge on it. So I'm really working the paint in, the wax into the paint, and then I'm wiping away the excess. And you can be sort of more aggressive with the wiping, or you can be a bit more gentle with it. It just depends on the look that you want. And as you can see, it starts to sort of bring out the details of the carving, and it also brings out just the warmth of the wood. So it really brings the piece to life. And the antiquing wax is the only finish you need. You don't need to add another finish over this. You can add some clear wax over it if you want to, but I wouldn't add another type of finish over the wax. This is all you need. So we're going to wax the entire chair, and then we'll move on to upholstery.